And while none of them are springing to mind right now, I must have taken on thousands of American English words. I'm sure you fine folks will let me know in the comments below. Folks! Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those pertains to assimilation. Assimilating into another's culture. Now, if you are new to my videos, here's a little bit of background about me. As you can probably tell, I'm not from the state of Kentucky. I actually originated from a country known as England. I lived in England for the first 26 years of my life. But in 2008, at the height of the recession, I, along with my wife, made the very bizarre decision to leave London for Indiana. After 8 years living in that very state, we moved to Chicago in 2016, prompting the Cubs to win the World Series. And in all that time, in those 11 years, it occurred to me just the other day while making a video about 5 lies that British people in America tell themselves, that I had been Americanized. Don't get me wrong, I'm still 99% English. I've got the accent, the passport, and the crap hair. But there are facets of American life that I have acquired into my personality since moving here. And I've been thinking very deeply about these for the last 4 days, and it turns out that that number is appropriate because I can sum up each and every one of these as Lawrence's 4 C's. That is, every one of them begins with the letter C. And so without further ado, here are 4 big reasons that I've been totally Americanized. I come from a nation of tea lovers, though I'm not myself an avid tea drinker. As a matter of fact, for the first 31 years of my life, I didn't care for hot beverages at all beyond a simple, hot chocolate, a soothing drink that appealed at once to my laid-back nature and my admittedly sweet tooth. However, unable to overcome its smell, coffee was the drink that I detested above all others. Somehow its aroma always brought to mind something undrinkable that had festered beneath a stack of inexcusably dirty dishes. Over the years, my standard reaction to the question, "Can I get you a coffee?" had always been, "No thanks," accompanied by a vague feeling of disgust. This feeling wasn't improved either by the false notion that all coffee drinkers were somehow perpetually anxious, that the phrase, "I need a coffee," usually equated to "this day cannot get any bloody worse." And, I'd watch my wife, with her Starbucks Gold membership firmly in hand, order drinks whose titles were utterly unfathomable. "A grande peppermint iced and spiced no-whip mocha latte espresso coffee, please." At times I needed a translator, while she seemed to speak the lingo as if it was her first language. Perhaps it's the American in her. After all, Americans drink 1.5 times more coffee than residents of the United Kingdom. Indeed, not only do Americans drink more coffee, they eat more coffee too. Occasionally a partaker myself of tiramisu. You could say that it was these food items that laid the foundations for what would later become a life-changing experience. But even after treading the waters, after appealing once more to my sweet tooth, I still couldn't get past the smell. And I was around it now more than ever, following a recent career transition that had landed me in an office full of writers. Of course, being in such an office was a good thing, right? I mean, on a professional level, it's where I wanted to be, and honestly, I was happy. Why would I want to change that? What were my coffee-drinking colleagues getting that I didn't have already? The answer was simple: caffeine. I mean, sure, I'd been getting this from Dr. Pepper, who, by the way, was not a qualified physician, though most certainly gave me cause to seek one. And so one day, several years ago, I did it. I had my first mug of coffee. They say it has an acquired taste. On the one hand, it took me 31 years to acquire it. On the other, it came the moment I finished that first mug. Wow, within an hour, the fatigue had washed away and I felt 18 again. I even put on a t-shirt that said Radiohead. I mean, that didn't fit company dress code, but still. Now, at this point, you may be asking, what does the United States have to do with any of this? Wouldn't you have ended up in a similar scenario had you just stayed in England? Possibly, but there are 2 things that the United States has in greater abundance than the United Kingdom. Number 1, coffee, and number 2, the individual desire to succeed. In my case, it was a quest to achieve the latter that necessitated the latte. If I was going to live the American dream, I was going to have to do it with the following 3 things as my guide: a keyboard, a camera, and several boxes of Javalia. And while we're on the subject of success, that brings me on to my next entry. From England, I always looked to America as the place that sent men to the moon, that popularized the computer, and that produced my favorite films. I suppose on some level, this instilled in me a vague belief that anything was possible, right? That if you work hard and dare to dream, you can achieve anything. It was a mindset, if not a reality. After years of living in the US, it was that very mindset that would eventually overcome doubt. Growing up in the UK itself, an overachieving island of 63 million people, I was routinely exposed to my country's otherwise apologetic pessimistic outlook. An outlook wrought with excessive politeness and the phrase, "It never rains, it pours." In fact, purely by instinct, there were times years ago when I would apologize to somebody because they bumped into me. And I was the kind of person that said thanks to cash machines, although that might have just been a Lawrence thing and not so much a British thing. I mean, it's not that I didn't have confidence, it was that I didn't know how to use it. Actually, so overwhelmed was I by the sheer size of American life, its cars, its food, its self, that my former doubts stayed with me for a few years after I moved here. In fact, the only way I knew how to react to directives such as, "Hey, say the word rubbish," was with a sense of self-deprecation. But as I continued getting to grips with America's idiosyncrasies, and as I threw myself into the working environment that was initially customer service, I began to notice a style of interaction so absent from the majority of life back home. Americans were direct. Very, very direct. I think I initially mistook this for confrontational rhetoric, right? But I would eventually adopt a similar style myself, learning, for instance, to order a sandwich thus: "I'll have a 6-inch on wheat bread." Before, I'd have peppered my order with softening language like, "Would it be possible?" or "If you don't mind." That's because British interactions are built around not burdening the other person. Now don't worry, I haven't become insufferable or anything like that. There is a fine line between efficiently expressing one's feelings and hurting those of other people. Americans, like any other people on earth, sometimes fall either side of this line. But those who get it right, who retain a diplomatic tone while expressing exactly what he or she wants, are the very people that I'm talking about. Today, my newfound confidence has led me to places I wouldn't have imagined 5 years ago, right? So my old self couldn't have conceived he'd have written for BBC America, relocated to Chicago, and convinced 67,000 of you to subscribe to my channel. The truth is, America has taught me that the more you can directly communicate your wants and your needs, the more frequently these will come to fruition. After all, it never rains, it pours. And in Chicago, of course, it doesn't just rain, it bloody snows a lot, and it's probably set to do that here quite soon. We are now in the month of December, the temperatures just turned freezing out, I mean, below freezing. This was unheard of for me when I lived in England. Anytime that the temperature approached the freezing point of water, that was mass panic across England. Not so much Britain, I mean, the Scots, they could cope. Mind you, a lot of those keep warm because they have one of these on their chin. It's a beard in a lot of cases. But the truth is, Britain by no means has to endure weather of that magnitude, which is why I'm dressed like a Chicagoan. When I first moved to America, indeed the state of Indiana, I saw my whole life flash before me. And then I realized it was just my eyelashes had crystallized. I can't help it, I was forced by necessity to dress like an American, or I should say Americans that live north of the Mason-Dixon line, with some of their exceptions. It gets cold up here, it gets very snowy, it gets entirely unfit for humans, and so we have to dress like prior humans, Neanderthals, in sheepskin. It's not sheepskin, it's not real animal, I wouldn't do that. I used to think hoods like this looked silly, right, until I moved to Chicago and had it completely confirmed. But I embraced it after a while. At least I embraced what it does for you. This warms you up. You need that in this mess out there. Put it this way, in the winter in Chicago, I couldn't get away with wearing a thin Adidas jacket and a Burberry cap. I couldn't get away with that in England these days, nor could I ever. I was never a chav. Don't get that impression. And that's the winter for you. Now, I couldn't get away with only wearing this. I'd be arrested for one. But also there are other parts of your body to keep warm. So you sometimes have to wear, multiple layers of trousers, and the specific type of trouser. You might have a very thick pair of jeans that's very common to the Midwest. In fact, I was once bought as a Christmas present a very oversized pair of baggy jeans. They were gone by January 1st. Had to make a fire somehow, so that's what it is. Sorry, Grandma. I never told you about that. And then of course there's gloves. You can't get away with just a thin pair of cotton gloves. It has to be the thick, heavy-duty, insulated pair. That's what I have right now. I mean, when I first moved to the US, I underestimated it, I suppose. I brought with me this pair of Manchester United gloves, and they performed worse than the current team. And in the words of George Michael, I was almost frostbitten. You know that song? Frostbitten, twice shy. It's once bitten, isn't it? Yeah. So that's the winter, and of course that speaks to me most obviously right now because it is in fact winter. But if you go back a few months to the summer, there's another accessory that you might find in my wardrobe. Stay out of my wardrobe. It is one of these. Yes, look, isn't this the greatest thing? I am so cool. I'm so cool. But in England, we don't have these. I mean, we do. They exist, don't get me wrong. I remember I had an luminous orange one from Lightwater Valley when I was 9, but never wore one since until I moved to the US. And there are a number of reasons for this. Firstly, it keeps the sun out of your eyes. Although here in Chicago, the clouds tend to do that. And the high skyscrapers. But so I suppose when it comes down to it, I wear it really just to look cool. And I do look cool. And anyone who would tell me otherwise is either a liar or my mum. But I don't know why I started wearing this. This one in particular is quite sort of, you know, Americana-y. But I just found myself doing it. I mean, I think that when you fall into the film business and become a filmmaker, like me, I mean, I make YouTube videos. So it's near enough, isn't it? I wanted to look more like Steven Spielberg. You've got to feel the part. All I need on here is E.T. And that would make sense because I am an alien. A legal alien, as Sting once said. So this isn't New York, is it? And I'm not Sting. But the great thing about these is they're quite versatile, right? You can wear them like this, but you can also wear them like that. I don't. I mean, I wouldn't do this in public. I look like a 90s boy band member. Don't ask me to sing the Backstreet Boys, but anybody that was listening just then will notice that I said versatile. And it's interesting that, isn't it? Because a lot of Americans will say versatile, which is not something I ever adopted. But that doesn't mean there aren't Americanisms that I didn't. It's true, when you live in another country, you really can't help taking on the vocabulary of that country. And while none of them are springing to mind right now, I must have taken on thousands of American English words. I'm sure you fine folks will let me know in the comments below. Folks! There's one for you. We don't really use that term back in England, fine folks. And I think I started using that as an alternative to guys in the last few months. You know how a lot of young YouTubers start their videos with, "Hey guys!" Imagine if they substituted the word guys for folks. It would sound like a 1950s infomercial. "Well, if I'm not careful, I'll start talking like Jimmy Stewart. Oh, Mary, if George Bailey ever dressed like this, Clarence would lose his absolute stuff." So yes, I realized in this video that the word folks is most certainly an example. Why not look to other videos for more? And the first one, I guess. I know, right? Which is another one I've really picked up. The word trash is prevalent. In fact, whenever you try to say rubbish to somebody, they think you're speaking a foreign language most of the time, I think. Because my first job in the United States was working for a cell phone company. And so I could hardly be saying, "Hey, how can I help you out today with your mobile phone?" The word sidewalk. This one came up the other day, right? I did a video all about my new apartment, but it has slipped in. I do refer to it as the fall, and there's just nothing I can do about that now. I'm not wearing any trousers as I record this video, but you'll notice there, I refer to them as trousers merely to make the point that I've stopped doing that in my everyday life. I now refer to them as pants without thinking about it. When I heard that they were called eggplant, I feared the worst. I imagined it was going to be some kind of odd mutation between vegetation and yolk. I said vacation, and I'm always saying that, and I think it's because of you fine people. There was no operable light as you walked in the door, so we'd taken to hanging one of these. This is a flashlight, I was just trying to scare you all. Well, that confirms it. I'm multilingual. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below if you've assimilated to another country. Don't forget to hit my subscribe button so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. And a big shout out to all of my patrons without whom none of this would be possible. From the lighting equipment to the editing software to the sweaty jackets, every penny really helps. If you would like to become a patron of my channel today, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Anyone who becomes a patron will get access to my secret live stream, and anybody who pledges $5 or more a month will get that, plus access to my secret podcast and more. Until next time, stay warm, and I'll see you soon.